The Christmas storm arrived faster than anyone in rural Wyoming had expected. By late evening, the sky had turned a hard, unforgiving gray, and snow began to fall in thick, blinding sheets. Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel as her small sedan crawled along the empty highway. Radio warnings crackled through the speakers, urging drivers to find shelter immediately, but the nearest town was still miles away. She had promised herself she would make it before dark. Now, regret settled heavy in her chest. The wind slammed against the car, shaking it like a fragile toy. Snow covered the road so completely that the painted lines vanished, leaving her unsure where the pavement ended and the fields began. Her headlights reflected nothing but swirling white. Each mile felt harder than the last. Emily's fingers were stiff inside her gloves, her breath shallow with fear. She whispered a quiet prayer, though she wasn't sure who she was praying to anymore. Without warning, the engine sputtered. The car jerked once, then slowed, and finally died in the middle of the storm. Emily tried the ignition again and again, panic rising with every failed attempt. Silence followed, broken only by the howl of the wind. Her phone showed 1 weak bar of battery and no signal. Within minutes, the cold began creeping inside the car, biting through her coat and settling deep into her bones. She knew staying inside meant freezing. Gathering what courage she had left, Emily stepped out into the storm. The cold hit her instantly, stealing her breath. Snow soaked her boots as she struggled forward, unsure of direction, guided only by instinct and desperation. The darkness felt endless, the storm merciless. Every step became heavier, her legs trembling as exhaustion took hold. Thoughts of home flashed through her mind, warm lights, familiar voices, the comfort of Christmas she had taken for granted. Tears froze on her cheeks as she realized how small and alone she was against nature's fury. Still, she kept moving. Stopping meant surrender. Far away, hidden beyond the storm, a lonely ranch stood quiet and dark, its owner unaware that a life was slipping toward its doorstep. Emily didn't know that hope was closer than she believed. All she knew was that she had to survive the night. Somewhere, somehow, there had to be a light waiting for her in the storm. Jack Miller had lived on the Wyoming ranch for over 30 years, long enough to read the land the way others read books. That night, the land felt uneasy. The wind roared across the open plains, slamming against the old wooden house, rattling the windows like an urgent warning. Jack stood near the fireplace, staring into the flames, but his mind wasn't at rest. Christmas Eve had always been quiet since his wife passed away, yet tonight's silence felt heavier, charged with something he couldn't explain. He turned off the radio after hearing the final weather alert. Roads closed. Travel not advised. Whiteout conditions across the county. Jack exhaled slowly and looked out the window. Beyond the glass was nothing but darkness and moving snow. Still, a strange thought tugged at him, someone might be out there. He had seen enough winters to know storms like this didn't forgive mistakes. Pulling on his coat, Jack stepped onto the porch. The cold cut through him instantly, sharp and unforgiving. He scanned the horizon, though visibility was nearly zero. No headlights, no sound but the wind. Yet the feeling refused to leave. He remembered his father's words from long ago, "When the storm comes, light the way. Someone always needs it." Jack went back inside and made a decision. One by one, he turned on every light he could. Porch lamps glowed first, then the windows, casting warm yellow squares into the night. He carried lanterns to the barn, hanging them high, their flames flickering bravely against the storm. Even the old shed lights, rarely used, came alive. The ranch slowly transformed from a lonely patch of darkness into a beacon. As Jack worked, memories surfaced, nights when his wife had insisted they leave the porch light on, just in case. Back then, he'd smiled at the habit. Now, it felt like a promise carried forward. He paused, looking at the lights spread across the property, cutting through the snow like quiet hope. Inside, Jack stoked the fire higher and set water to boil. If someone did arrive, they'd need warmth, fast. He laid out thick blankets and placed dry towels near the hearth. The ranch hadn't hosted a guest in years, yet he moved with certainty, as if he'd been preparing for this moment all along. Every so often, Jack returned to the window, searching the storm. Minutes stretched into an hour. Doubt whispered that he was being foolish. But then he noticed something, movement, barely visible beyond the swirling snow. His heart quickened. He leaned closer to the glass, straining his eyes. Was it just the storm playing tricks, or had someone truly seen the light? Jack grabbed his coat again and opened the door, the warmth spilling out into the freezing night. "If you're out there," he said quietly, his voice carried away by the wind, "keep coming. You're almost home." Emily had lost track of time. Minutes and hours blurred together as the storm pressed in from every direction. Her legs felt heavy, her steps uneven, and each breath burned like ice in her lungs. The world around her was nothing but white and sound, wind screaming, snow stinging her face, her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wondered how much longer she could keep going before her body gave up completely. Then, through the chaos, she saw it. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a soft glow flickering far ahead, almost swallowed by the snow. She stopped, squinting through the storm, afraid to hope. But the light didn't disappear. It grew stronger, steadier, cutting a thin path through the darkness. Her heart leapt painfully in her chest. Light meant people. Light meant warmth. Light meant survival. Summoning the last of her strength, Emily moved toward it. Every step was a battle. Snow pulled at her boots, threatening to knock her down. Her hands were numb, her fingers stiff and useless, but she clenched them into fists and pushed forward. The light guided her like a promise she couldn't afford to doubt. Whenever she stumbled, she lifted her eyes again, fixing on the glow ahead, refusing to let it fade. Memories came uninvited as she walked, her mother's laugh during Christmas mornings, the smell of pine and cinnamon, the way home always felt safe. Those memories warmed her more than her coat ever could. She whispered to herself, over and over, just a little farther. Each word felt like a lifeline. The lights grew larger now. She could make out shapes, buildings, fences, the outline of a barn standing firm against the storm. Tears streamed down her face, freezing almost instantly, but she didn't care. She had made it. Or at least, she was close. Her body was trembling uncontrollably, exhaustion dragging her toward the ground, but the thought of stopping terrified her more than the cold. Somewhere nearby, a door opened. Warm light spilled outward, brighter than anything she had seen all night. Emily tried to call out, but her voice came out as a broken whisper, stolen by the wind. She stumbled onto the porch, her hands scraping against the wooden railing as her knees finally gave way. Jack saw her collapse. He rushed forward without hesitation, his boots sinking into the snow as he reached her side. She was painfully cold to the touch, her skin pale. Beneath the frost, gently, carefully, he lifted her, feeling how light she was in his arms. "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. As he carried her inside, the door closed against the storm, shutting out the violence of the night. The warmth hit Emily all at once. The last thing she felt before slipping into darkness was heat, light, and the certainty that someone had been waiting for her all along. Emily's eyes fluttered open to the soft glow of the fireplace. The warmth wrapped around her like a blanket, but her body still trembled uncontrollably. Jack was kneeling beside her, gently rubbing her hands to restore circulation. The room smelled of burning wood, pine, and something comforting she couldn't name. For the first time since she'd left her stalled car hours ago, she felt safe. "You're going to be okay," Jack said quietly, his voice steady despite the roaring storm outside. He handed her a thick blanket, and she buried herself inside it. Emily tried to speak, but her lips were stiff, her teeth chattering. Jack poured a cup of hot tea and placed it in her hands. She blew on it, savoring the warmth that traveled slowly into her frozen fingers, her throat, her chest. Every sip felt like life itself returning. Emily's gaze wandered around the ranch house. The windows glowed with soft light, the decorations simple but comforting. A wreath hung on the door, a small Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, and a scattering of handmade ornaments gave the space a lived-in, loving feel. The house was more than a building, it was a sanctuary in the storm, a home she had never known but now desperately wanted to belong to. Jack sat across from her, keeping the fire between them. His eyes never left her face. "How did you find us?" he asked gently. Emily swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw the lights. I didn't know where I was going, but the lights, they kept me moving. They kept me alive." Jack nodded, understanding. He remembered the countless Christmases spent alone, the quiet nights wondering if anyone else would need his help. Tonight, his instincts had been right. Someone had been lost, and he had the chance to guide them home. The storm outside raged on, but inside, time seemed to slow. Emily told him how her car had broken down, how she had wandered for what felt like hours, and how hopeless the world had seemed. Jack listened without interruption, offering warmth, tea, and the occasional reassuring smile. He didn't interrupt her with questions or advice. He let her words flow, knowing that sometimes the simplest act of kindness, listening, offering warmth, showing presence, was more powerful than anything else. After a while, Emily leaned back in the chair, exhausted but safe. The firelight flickered across her face, and for the first time all night, she smiled. Jack couldn't help but smile too, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. The storm was still out there, but inside, the ranch was alive with hope, light, and the quiet magic of Christmas. For the first time that night, Emily realized that being lost wasn't just about distance or snow, it was about isolation. And in that moment, with the fire crackling and Jack watching over her, she felt found. By the time Emily's hands stopped shaking, the storm outside had not lessened, but inside the ranch, the world felt entirely different. Jack moved around the room, gathering more blankets and placing a small tray of cookies and warm bread on the table. Emily watched him, noticing the care in every movement, the patience in every gesture. It was remarkable how a stranger could feel so familiar, so safe, in the span of a single night. "I didn't think anyone would be out there tonight," Jack said, finally sitting beside her with his own cup of tea. His eyes, kind yet strong, studied her with quiet concern. Emily nodded, her voice still weak but steady. I was lucky to see the lights. Without them, I don't know," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The unspoken words carried their weight anyway. She had been walking on the edge of despair, and Jack's light had guided her back. They shared a silence for a few moments, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. Then Emily smiled faintly. "I've never been to a ranch like this," she admitted. "It's beautiful." Jack chuckled softly, a deep sound that seemed to echo through the room. "It's simple," he said. "But it's home. And tonight, it seems it has a little magic." He didn't mention that he rarely had visitors, or that the house often felt emptier in winter than it ever should. Tonight, the emptiness was gone, replaced by warmth, laughter, and presence. Emily felt herself relaxing in ways she hadn't known she needed. She told him about her family, her small town several hours away, and how she had been traveling to visit relatives for Christmas. The storm had caught her off guard, leaving her stranded and terrified. Jack listened patiently, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking gentle questions that made her feel heard without prying. As the night wore on, Emily found herself noticing the little details, the way the firelight danced across the walls, the soft ticking of the clock, the smell of pine mingling with the warmth of the hearth. Each detail felt comforting, grounding her, letting her forget the cold and fear that had gripped her hours before. Jack moved toward the piano in the corner, lifting the lid carefully. He played a soft melody, one he remembered his wife playing years ago, letting the notes fill the room. Emily closed her eyes, letting the music seep into her, washing away the last remnants of panic and exhaustion. For the first time that night, she laughed softly, a sound mingling with the music and the fire, creating a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. The storm could rage outside, she realized, but inside, something more powerful had taken hold. Connection, safety, and the quiet joy of Christmas shared unexpectedly. In that small Wyoming ranch, two strangers had found something neither of them had expected: comfort, warmth, and a spark of hope that might just change everything. By dawn, the storm had finally passed. The once raging wind was replaced by silence, broken only by the soft crunch of snow underfoot and the occasional call of a distant bird. Sunlight spilled over the untouched fields, glinting on icy branches and powdery drifts. The world outside seemed almost magical, peaceful in a way that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the previous night. Emily stirred awake in the warm guest room Jack had prepared for her. The blankets were heavy and comforting, and the faint smell of pine and burning wood lingered in the air. She sat up slowly, stretching her stiff limbs, feeling the warmth of safety for the first time since she had left her car. Her mind replayed the events of the storm, the fear, the blinding snow, the way she had followed the lights that had guided her to this ranch. She realized, with a quiet smile, that without Jack's lights and his kindness, she might never have made it. Downstairs, Jack was already tending the fire, making sure the hearth glowed as brightly as the night before. The ranch, bathed in the soft golden light of morning, looked almost otherworldly. Emily descended the stairs, and Jack turned, offering her a smile that was gentle, yet filled with something deeper: relief, pride, and a quiet sense of joy. "You're awake," he said simply. "The storm's gone." Looks like the world is ready for Christmas. Morning. Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and awe. She stepped closer to the windows and gazed outside. The ranch was surrounded by a pristine blanket of snow, the fence lines softened by frost, the barn and outbuildings glowing in the early light. She could still see the lamps Jack had lit, softly flickering remnants of the guiding lights that had saved her. Jack joined her at the window. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the world waking under the snow, feeling the shared quiet of survival, safety, and the miracle of being found. Then Emily turned toward him. "You didn't just save me last night," she said softly. "You gave me a second chance. A chance to see Christmas in a way I never thought I would." Jack's eyes softened. "And you reminded me," he said, "that sometimes even the smallest gesture, a light in the darkness, can change everything." They shared a quiet laugh, one filled with relief and warmth, the kind that settles deep in the chest. Breakfast followed, simple, comforting, and shared with the ease of newfound companionship. Outside, the snow sparkled, and though the ranch was quiet, it was alive with the memory of last night's storm and the hope that had come from it. As Emily prepared to leave, Jack handed her a small wrapped gift, a simple token of the night that had brought them together. "For remembering," he said with a gentle smile. She opened it to find a tiny lantern, symbolic of the lights that had guided her home. Tears filled her eyes as she held it close, understanding that the storm had given her more than survival. It had given her connection, trust, and the promise of friendship that might last far beyond this Christmas. As Emily drove away, the lamps on the ranch stood quietly, their light no longer just a beacon in the storm, but a symbol of hope, warmth, and the magic that Christmas had finally brought to two lost souls.